Okay, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for this panel, Q's and A's with Q's and A's. We are very excited for this panel, but just a few housekeeping tips first. One is that the chat has been disabled just to make the safe for the community, but we do have a Q&A function that's open where you can put your questions in, and at one point you are going to be asked to put some thoughts into the Q&A, and please do that. Then that will kind of take the place of the chat function at that point. We are also going to have a hard stop at 2:20, so please don't be surprised if we just kind of kick you out at 2:20, but we'll try and give you good warning for that. And I'm just going to briefly introduce our panelists, and we'll put their full bios in the chat. So here we go. The moderator is Shelley Gaske. She is a queer and disabled adoptee writing in Oregon, an attendee of the Iowa Writers Workshop and a 2025 Key West Literary Seminar Fellow. Her work appears in 68205, The Anna, and elsewhere. KB Brookins is a writer, educator, and cultural worker from Texas. They are the author of How to Identify Yourself with a Wound, Freedom House, and Pretty. Kristen Felicetti is the author of the novel Log Off. For over a decade, she edited the literary magazine, The Bushwick Review. And finally, Mariama J. Lockington is an adoptee, author, and educator, and the author of award-winning books for Black Girls Like Me, In the Key of Us, Forever Is Now, and the forthcoming I've Got My Love to Keep Me Warm. Thank you for holding this up, Shelley. All of these books are available in our bookstore, Loyalty Bookstore. So we'll put the link in the chat, and please feel free to buy their books. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Shelley. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, Alice. And don't forget, immediately after this, we will have the adoptee sizzle reel, and we'll put that in the chat so that you can continue with the programming. I want to start off by thanking Alice and Susan and all the fabulous people that made today possible. The Adoptee Lit Fest is a wildly needed and just wildly fun idea always. So as mentioned, I am Shelley Gaske, and this is Q's and A's with Q's and A's, questions and answers with queer and adopted people. Thanks for joining. I put this panel together because while there are not nearly enough adoptee writers out there, there really aren't enough queer adoptee writers out there. And I wanted to bring together 3 queer adoptee authors publishing the books that we all need in the zeitgeist, as it were. We're going to start with one of my very favorite questions, which is, I want to know right off the top, what in your life are you a slut for, and what are you a snob about? I ask this of a lot of people, and it catches people off guard sometimes. So I'm happy to go first. I am an unrepentant pizza slut. Short of it dropping cheese side down on a very dirty floor, like a gritty floor, it's probably still going to happen. And I'm also a slut for a great book cover. Kristen's is on top. I actually think there's only good book covers, but the cover to Log Off is delicious. I do tend to be a snob for pizza and electro music. And no, I don't really want to talk about it because I have strong feelings about both. First up, we have Kristen, whose debut novel, Log Off, is completely written as a live journal in the year of our Lord 2000. And a cover girl of Ride or Die magazine. Kristen, I bet, has excellent taste in what she's a slut and a snob for. May we hear it, please?
Thanks, Shelley. I am a slut for salmon, which I know is like a little bit of a weird thing to say, but it's like my same food. I would eat it every day if I could. except it's kind of an expensive food to eat, so can't do that. And I am a snob for t-shirt fabrics.
Okay. Are there t-shirt fabrics that, well, what's the standard? What will you not accept in your life?
I mean, there's nothing that I won't accept, but I prefer like a t-shirt fabric that's like a blend. Like I always will look at the tag to make sure it's like maybe like a tri-blend type, like really, really soft cotton. That's ideal. Or like a vintage t-shirt that's built in. That feels really, really nice and soft.
That's excellent. I would also eat salmon every day.
Me
I
too.
appreciate it. Yeah, salmon friends forever. KB, we're aching to know what you're a slob, not a slob, a slut and a snob for.
I love that mix up. Feels natural.
Yeah.
I guess I would say I'm a slut for just like literary devices. So like I'm a poet, right? So when I like see a well-crafted sentence, I'm just like, this makes me want to continue to the next one. A snob. Well, I'm from Texas, so I guess I probably am a snob about barbecue. Like when I'm not in Texas and I eat barbecue other places, I'm just like the tenderness of this brisket, blah blah blah. You think like I'm a pit master when really I just like go places and eat barbecue and sometimes make my own. But yeah, those would probably be my answers. Also, stealing yours, maybe Shelley, like also a good book cover.
Mhm.
I do judge a book by its cover. I'll say it, I'll
It's
be
hard not to, right?
but yeah, even if I don't know an author, if I'm drawn in by their book cover, like I will pick it up and thumb through.
Yeah, I've read terrible books because the cover is good, and then I feel wronged. Mariama, you have a book coming out later this year. You had a book come out last year. You're quite busy. But in between all the writing, where do your slut and snob preferences lay?
Yeah, I love this question so much. So I am a absolute slut for any type of savory thing that comes in a little like wrapper or dough. So I'm talking like gyoza, beef patties, samosas, lumpia, like if it comes savory wrapped up in like a little dough, I will eat it and would prefer to have that only. Also love salmon. So um and then I'm also a slut for reality TV. I didn't grow up with TV, so I've made up for it in my adulthood. And then I am a snob. I think I'm becoming a snob about houseplants. Like I started collecting a lot of them and I just got a Thai constellation monstera that I'm feeling like very fancy about. So I would say I'm a snob about that. And then to sort of follow or piggyback on KB, I spent a lot of time after college in the Bay Area. And so I'm a snob about burritos. Like if it's not a California and specifically like a California, Northern California burrito, I'm kind of turn my nose up about it.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
What makes a San Francisco burrito?
So it's beans, rice, lots of avocado if you will, like guacamole, different hot sauces. It's huge. My favorite thing to do is eat like 3/4 of it and then save the little nub for later as like a little treat. It drives my partner crazy that I save it, but I'm like, no, it's gonna be a sweet treat, not sweet, but a treat later. Um, yeah, and just the ratio of things and the flavors and the way the meat is cooked. I don't know. It's anytime I go back to the Bay, I'm like, let me hit up my favorite taquerias first and foremost.
That is the only real reason to travel, I think, is food. Thank you all for that. I like this question because now I have 100 more questions about everything, but I'd already written these, so we'll go for this. I want to continue with something that's in the introduction of KB's memoir, Pretty. This is a book that I wish I had had. Sometimes the why do we write question comes up, but I'm curious who you usually find yourself writing to. We usually have like that ideal person or entity or thought process. And does that change depending on what you're working on? Or, do you set out with an intention to write to someone or something? or do you figure it out along the way? KB, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I feel like a lot of writers like to think that they write for everybody, but that's just like simply not true. Like no book is gonna be for everybody because we come to the book like with our own point of view. And our own point of view is gonna be informed by where we come from, who we grew up around, the systems that we were in, whether that be church or like a religious community or school or so on and so forth. So for me in particular, as a Black trans person who grew up and I'm born, raised, and based in Texas. I think that my point of view is very particular, right, to that kind of background. I also grew up very religious. Like my mom was a piano player in church, my dad was a preacher, like, and all of that, like, even like shows in like the rhetoric that I use. Even though like I have not particularly been like the most religious since I was like 18, like I still find myself like using those phrases, right? So I think to that end, my audience would definitely be people that just like feel me, like that come from like similar backgrounds, whether it be being from the South or being Black American growing up in that household. Also growing up around some kind of like a significant religious background. Like I think those are the people that kind of gravitate to my work. And I'm always very touched, you know, when people reach out and they're like, it feels like this was so me. Because definitely like in my introduction, I'm trying to express like there was not a lot of books I could turn to be like, this is so me. But like my white counterparts or my like non-queer counterparts could look at, I don't know, Mean Girls and be like, this is so me. And I wanted to write a book. I set out to write a book that was like so enmeshed in my point of view and the point of view of the people that I grew up around so that people like me could at least have this book to turn to. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And also leaving the door open because you also never know who it's going to connect with on so many different levels. Mariama, you've got 2 middle grade books and then a YA out and one coming out later. Who do you feel you're writing to? I feel like kids is not the right answer.
No, and I love what KV said about like writers like to think they're writing for everyone, but no, it's okay if your book is not for everyone or your writing is not for everyone. So I very much relate to the idea of writing the book you wish you could have found, you know, when you were growing up and going to libraries or bookstores. I was always looking for myself in stories or something I could relate to, something that I could say, oh my gosh, that's so me, that's my experience, especially growing up with white parents and in mostly white spaces. I did not, at least in the 1980s and 1990s, like find a book about a Black girl living in my particular circumstance. So that was important to me when I started writing. And to expand on the like, I write for kids, I do very much love writing for young people. I'm an educator in my other job, and I've worked a lot with middle school students specifically and also high school students. And so I do like writing for that audience and actually think when I get feedback from young people, that is the feedback I take to heart the most. Forget the gatekeepers, forget the adults, sorry, adults who are reading YA, but like if a young person is like, hey, I hate reading, but I read this book, your book, that to me is like motivation and confirmation that I'm doing something right. And so I do tap into sort of like what I needed as a young person. And then also because I work with young people, listening to what they need, what they're talking about, what they're facing, and trying to infuse my stories with some of that, and hoping that it will connect with them as well. So it's a little bit of both. I do genuinely like writing for young people, but also it's for myself. It's for like an inner child as well.
Yeah, which kind of creates a positive feedback loop. You know, you're listening and then reflecting on your own experiences too. Thank you. I'm actually lucky because I know Kristen just a little bit, and I have pretty good intel that there was some concern about Log Off being, is it a YA? Is it an adult novel? And I'm curious how did that question, what genre is this, shape Log Off's journey? And did thinking about the difference between YA and adult change how you saw the book?
Yeah, I think the book still kind of straddles those two worlds, right? Like I've heard it being described as a young adult novel, and then I've also heard it just been described as like a literary novel that has like a coming of age story, and I'm absolutely thrilled for both, right? Like those kind of distinctions like don't matter too much to me because it's kind of just thinking about like readership. Like I completely agree with KB and Mariama where it's like, yeah, you don't want to write for like everybody necessarily, but but the answer, the readership could be anybody, right? Like whoever sort of does resonate with your story. And I feel I'm so equally like thrilled and feel lucky when it's somebody who, my book is about like a little bit about the early internet, but there's been some older readers that, don't have that experience that really speak to it because they still remember like the pain and joys of adolescence. And then, and then like teen readers or people that have just gotten out of like their teenage years too, who are also having a very different internet experience. But everybody has been an adolescent at some point and has had that experience. And so, to some degrees, like, the joys and the pains.
Yeah. And just to follow up, who do you feel like you were writing for? Was that?
I feel kind of just that, right? Like I feel like it is very meaningful to me when people who have like demographic similarities. To me, like say it resonates queer, adoptee, person of color, someone who's just very online. But it's when anyone sort of like there might be something so minute in like that might resonate in their experiences, and when they share that's I'm very grateful for those readers too.
Well, and it's wild how, what you were saying, YA and adult genres can be so different in how they're marketed and how they're perceived. And, we talked about how sometimes people look down on adults reading YA when really you're reading, who cares? That's fantastic. Because there's really so much overlap. It's not like you turn 18 and you only want the most literary of stories. Speaking of genres, we have a couple people here that have definitely maneuvered between poetry and memoir and essay and novel. KB, I was curious, how do you know when to switch gears? Because you put out 2 poetry books and now Pretty is very lyrical and revisits some work. Do things come to you as a certain way, or do you explore them or change genre halfway through?
Yeah, good question. I write poetry and nonfiction so far. That's what I published. I also write screenplays and the very, very occasional short story. I'm like the fiction girly, so I'm like, I don't know how y'all do it. Sustaining an entire story for like 300 plus pages. I'm like, beats me. It feels like magic. But anyway, for me in particular, actually Pretty started as like a poetry collection because like maybe an earlier KB like 7 years ago was like, I'm a poet, I write poetry, I'm only ever gonna write poetry. And then I kind of hit a wall with this book in particular and was like, there is something, there is a storytelling device that I maybe need to put down and pick up like some others in order to like say exactly what I'm trying to say. And sometimes when I'm going through it with a poem, I just start writing prose and being like, what is it that I'm actually trying to say? And then I found that the prose that I was writing just felt much more resonant to me than the like poems that I was trying to like force. So then I started writing like a essay, like istic book, which ultimately culminated into this memoir where I feel like it's just a story that I'm telling through whatever storytelling mechanism works, right? There are poems in there. There are also bits of prose in there. And I think for me, it's just when I'm thinking in poetry, quote unquote, I'm thinking in like music, specifically like repetition, alliteration, like concision, line breaks, all that stuff. And when I'm thinking in prose, I'm thinking less about music and like more about like story in a different way. Because like for me in particular, and I know there are narrative poems, I'm writing a narrative poetry collection. However, when I'm thinking of like how to get to A to B, I'm thinking more about emotion than like plot. And like with like essay stuff, it's a little more like plot driven. That's just my like personal distinction. I think it's all like storytelling. When I say like I am a creative, I'm a writer. It's like I write words on a page and like however it comes out is how it comes out. And when it's not working one way, then I try another one. And luckily with me trying another one, it turned into a book. But yeah.
Yeah, that experimentation, does that feel scary or tricky or overwhelming or natural or both?
I think in order to be a writer, you have to have like a healthy level of delusion where you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna pull this off, but I'm gonna try. And it's all about the trying. Like truly, I think like a writer, as in like what we put on the shelf, is not a first draft, right? It's like multiple drafts of you trying different ways to say what it is that you need to say. So I am all about the trying. Like the trying is actually the writing. Like writing is rewriting, and writing is like, okay, I'm looking at this, thing that's happened in my life, right? Which is creative nonfiction. But let me look at it from this angle, from this other perspective, or let me look at it from like not me actually being there, but instead me thinking about it in retrospect. Like I just tried a whole bunch of stuff and still until it started gelling together. And I think that's generally my writing process. Like maybe I have like 7 versions of the same thing, and the thing that is feeling most natural, because I'm also thinking about like what feels like inevitable. If it's feeling like I'm forcing something forward, then maybe I need to put that down and try something else. But I'm sorry, that's such a woo-woo answer. But I hope that gives some clarity.
Yeah, I think part of being a writer, as you mentioned, maybe having light delusion and also dabbling in woo-woo on the weekends is just part of the gig, really. In just the one, yeah, in Forever Is Now. Ooh, another good cover. Um, Mariama, it's a lyrical novel. I mean, so you kind of get the best of both worlds there. One of my favorite pet peeves is when an author who maybe isn't self-identified as a poet puts poetry in their books, and it kind of, shows. But this is quite the opposite, because this is just gorgeous all the way through. Did you have any reservations about writing a lyrical novel, especially for like a YA audience who may be less familiar with that format? I would say that many people are not exactly familiar with the format, but was the YA audience different at all?
That's such a great question. And I think, oh, first of all, the cover of that is an artist named Alex Cabal. I shout her out all the time because I had nothing to do with how beautiful that cover is. And I love it so much. So Alex Cabal, look them up. But so it's funny, and we're talking about like marketing and how your book gets marketed. I don't know how to not write in a hybrid space. Like I'm a trained poet. I came up on spoken word and slam poetry. I also have a music background. Both of my parents are musicians. Like I don't know how to not exist in a hybrid space with my writing. And Forever Is Now is the first book that was marketed as a novel in verse, but there are ways in my first 2 novels that poetry, I'm playing with form and poetry, and for Black girls like you, I don't use any punctuation except periods, which drives some people nuts, but it's because that book actually started out as a collection of poetry, as an MFA thesis, and then I turned it into a middle grade novel that has plot. And so I kind of feel like living in this space where I'm writing poems, prose, sometimes nonfiction is actually very mimetic. Like it mimics my identity as an adoptee, as a queer person, as like not fitting into any particular certain box, but existing in a lot of different places with a lot of nuances and a lot of different intersections. So Forever Is Now just came out as like this is all going to be like lyrical poem prosy stuff. That just is how this book has to be. And I think the thing that's interesting is like novels in verse or lyrical novels have had a really great space in the publishing world, like Elizabeth Acevedo's Poet X. Of course, I'm blanking on all the other amazing novels in verse, but there are a lot of amazing novels in verse that are out there. And actually, what I've heard from educators and from young people is that sometimes approaching a book that is broken up into poems or shorter pieces of prose, lyrical prose, actually is less intimidating and draws readers in a way, and reluctant readers, people who think they don't like reading. And so that's, so I didn't have any reservations about it being a lyrical novel, or um and have gotten really good feedback from young people about it in that way. And then also just sometimes the story tells you what form it needs. And this one about mental health and queerness and family and finding your joy just needed to be written in this particular way.
That's great. I don't know how to not exist in a hybrid space.
What is
That's so
what is
true.
that?
Yeah,
What is
I mean,
that?
that's what home is. This interesting accumulation. Kristen, yours is formatted as a live journal, and I mean that in the best possible way possible. Creating a very specific and sometimes painful nostalgia for people of a certain age. And included with most of the entries is a current music section, which was sort of the make or break thing when I was reading live journals. Like, do you include music? Because if you don't, I don't have time for you. But it creates this beautiful soundtrack to the book, which, I mean, I don't know if there's an official playlist. I made one for this book because I was like, these are all the songs I love. And then also back to Forever Is Now, Sadie and the other characters use this activism forward social media app called Ruckus. So there's this great use of like media as a character, or the audience of social media as a character. Ellie talks about the people that are reading her live journal and sort of connects with them in this sometimes strange way. Sadie meets a number of people off of Ruckus. So I guess we'll start with Kristen. Did you feel any type of way about including social media as a way to structure the book, or how did you stumble across that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel pretty strongly about this. I think some people feel that like including online or internet stuff is like dated, and I don't feel that way at all. I feel that it's like completely like just another like tool in your like craft set to sort of tell stories. And so for live journal, like kind of I think, it was like a fun thing to do. Obviously for certain people, like it's really nostalgic, the current music. But it essentially, for people that don't know what that is, like it's essentially like an epistolary, like diary format. And so I felt that it was like a really exciting way to sort of tell the story and pace the story and use like different types of story techniques where it's like there can be storylines that follow all the way through, or some can be like very episodic and contained in that particular diary entry, or you could just do something really short, the way that people actually write online with like a 2 sentences or a survey. And then also there's kind of like pacing is created by like the gaps in between the entries. So I think, yeah, it was just kind of that. It was like, I mean, there's kind of a nostalgic hook for it, but for me, almost all that stuff kind of just falls away because it's just it's like pop culture or something. Like you can always sort of place your own references in that place. But then it's kind of just like it's kind of like what actually like are all the moving parts of a story to make it happen.
Yeah, it also works as sort of a filter or a mask for like the character, because we sort of learn more about Ellie as the story goes on by what she's not telling us or what she's alluded to, and we're, like which scenes she thinks are important. Um, which is just a really fun way to do it. And it almost adds like a bit of a mystery to it, because she's not unreliable, I think. She just is giving you an incomplete story, which is often how we do things.
Can I say
Yeah, yeah.
something real quick? Because it's what you said about like worried about dating your book, putting in social media. I had this conversation with my editor, and it wasn't that I couldn't include a social media platform. It's just that she was like, maybe don't name it TikTok or Instagram or anything specific, but like, can you create your own platform in the life of this story that will work in the ways that you need it for your character? And so I actually joined TikTok as research. Just want to say that up front. And then I stayed and started creating content because I love it so much. But it helped me. And then I came up with Ruckus for Forever Is Now. And my main character, Sadie, is like struggling with her mental health, is housebound a lot of the time. And I think, adults are always like, oh, social media is like destroying kids' brains and all this stuff, but there's a really important access, community building, finding your people if you're not finding them at school or any, like, there's a really important aspect to that. And I wanted to explore how young people are leading and making change and connecting both in person and also online.
Yeah, I think you should build the Ruckus app.
It's a great name for a social media.
I
That
would
is
need
what's
a lot of tech help for that, but thank you.
Well, that's what other people are for, Mariama. I really like that. And so, feedback, especially from editors, because you think, oh gosh, I have to listen to people. I mean, do you ever really? But it can also be really tricky to figure out who you listen to and who you should just maybe ignore. Because sometimes we sort of put the cart before the horse and be like, I just want to get this beautiful book published. And I know for me, my first goal was to get literally anything published, literally anywhere. And I figured it would just naturally go from there. Like people would, just start writing me and then they would ask for stuff. But natural meant continuing to submit a lot of stuff and getting a lot of rejections. And I hate to say it, but I think some of us still hold the belief that books are like that too. You get one out in the world and then the rest sort of just falls into place. But even getting one out really can just be a Herculean effort. I wrote that word in my notes and I was like, you won't mess that up. Anyway, Kristen, would you be so kind as to give us the TLDR of how Logout came to be? Was it as easy breezy as setting up a live journal?
Definitely not. I will agree. It was like I did like sort of the traditional agent querying route. And it was very hard. Like, and also like there were a lot of close calls, like really great agents who did the full manuscript request and then the personalized rejection letter. And so it was really difficult. But then this kind of other avenue happened with like independent publishing. And so someone that I knew, she had started her own independent press. And so she knew I was working on this book. And so she was like, "Can you send it to me?" And and so I did. And then she kind of sent me like 2 weeks later, like this really deep like voice memo about everything she liked about the book, everything she understood about the book. And so I kind of just like thought about it for a while. I was like, there's some other things like in the fire here, but like this just kind of feels right for me. Like how like she really gets what I'm doing here. And also like knowing her working style and everything, and how I knew she was going to be like sort of a lifelong advocate for the book, and that has been 100% true. Beyond even the publishing cycle of the book, she obviously did so much hands-on for that. Her name is Lucy K. Shaw of Shabby Doll House. And yeah, I mean, the book has been almost out a year now. And literally, as like 2 weeks ago, there was like some opportunity to speak at a school. She sent it to me. Today, this morning, she said, "Good luck at your panel." So it's been a really, really wonderful publishing process, going that indie route.
Yeah, and finding an advocate for your book even after the publishing date is so big. Thank you. Hi, Lucy. Good job being an independent lady. KB, you've published multiple books, started with poetry and then moved into memoir. Could you speak about how the publishing journey changed with various projects you've had?
Yeah, sure. I started in independent publishing as well. So my poetry chapbook, How to Identify Yourself with a Wound, came out of a contest submission type thing. So I submitted to a chapbook contest, won that contest, and then that's how that happened. And it's a very, very small volunteer run press out of Austin, Texas, where I stay. So it's a lot of emailing back and forth for like one person, and then me doing kind of the promo run myself, doing like tour management, all of that stuff. It helps that I have like a background in like program coordination and like running literary arts programs. I think these days, no matter if you're like at a top 5 press or at an independent press, you're kind of expected to do the social media management of it all. So it like helps like for any writers on the call to like get some prowess in these apps, even if you're like, oh, I hate the apps. They are a means to an end, bro. Do like a newsletter, like find something to do to get your book outside of just like your friends, and then like magazines, right? Like a press will maybe send a PR thing to a magazine, right? But if the magazine doesn't pick it up, what is your next plan? You know? So like having that plan in place. But anyway, it helps also that like even before I had any books, I was like stapling together my own zine. So I come like also from the spoken word space, and like it's very subculture. It's very like we're not waiting on anybody to publish us, or we're just gonna publish ourselves. So I made like some zines with friends, right? And stuff like that. With my full length collection, Freedom House, which came out with Deep Vellum. Deep Vellum is a independent press. Thank you for pulling that up.
Another gorgeous cover.
Yeah, I'm a bad author, and I don't have none of my books with me at this residency, so that's my bad. But yeah, that came out with Deep Vellum. Shout out to them. They're a press based out of Dallas, Texas. A bit bigger, has a staff, right? However, like an independent press, so there was kind of like a give and take process in between us, with things that I did and things that they did, right? Also, that book won some awards. All of my books have won like at least one thing, which I'm very, very grateful for. And then my memoirs with NOF, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, and that was through an agenting type of thing, which is what Kristen was kind of speaking to. So I got an agent for my memoir, and then we sent that together to kind of different presses. And I ultimately went with NOF because it was important to me for someone to like be okay with me making my memoir, right? And not necessarily trying to hold me to the standards of like you have to tell a story from beginning, middle, end, because that's just like not how my brain works. And that's also like just not generally how I like tell stories. And I didn't want to sacrifice also the like complexity of it. So like I'm talking about, yes, my trans experience. I'm also talking about growing up Black in Texas. I'm talking about being an adoptee. So like having all of those things kind of exist in the same space was important to me. But yeah, I think the independent publishing, yes, is like different than like publishing via maybe like a agent, right? But ultimately it's like kind of three tracks that I know about, right? So submitting through Submittable, right? And getting stuff that way, a person or a press like reaching out to you, right, directly. And that only happens if you have, you know, some kind of presence online, y'all. And then also the third thing, which is going through the agent. So that all three of those have happened to me, and all three of those are very viable, you know, ways to get a book published in today's literary industry.
Yeah, you have to be kind of crafty, and sometimes I mean that very literally with like making zines and just getting the words out. Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. Mariama, you've come up with a number of different books. Has the publication journey changed as you went through them? Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, no, I think I was laughing about like whether you publish independently or you publish with the big five, like I think TV and movies have like misrepresented the author life because it's always like, oh, your book is published and then your, publisher sends you on like a 5-star tour all over the place and you're like in Italy. And that's just not how it works. I am at a big five press. I'm an imprint of Macmillan for my young adult and middle grade books. And I usually plan most of my tours myself via making connections with independent bookstores and then occasionally my publisher will send me to like a conference or two or a festival, but it's really the majority of me doing that. But I did an MFA, and so I was getting poems published in individual places. I do have a chapbook called The Lucky Daughter that came out in 2013 with Damaged Good Press, which was like a press for queer and trans authors. I don't think it's in existence anymore, but and so that was sort of how I started, and just working in that way. And then actually, my publishing journey for Black girls like me, my first middle grade, was that I wrote a nonfiction essay about being an adoptee that got published on BuzzFeed, and an editor, my now editor, read it and said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book for young people? Having your experience as an adoptee at the core." And I don't know why, because I work with kids, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me that I could write for young people, but when that happened, it sort of clicked. And so I had this backward entrance into Big Five Publishing, where like I didn't have an agent, I had an editor interested because I wrote something about myself. And then I had to work backwards to like get representation, get a contract, and then turn a book of poems into an actual like plot driven middle grade novel. But I think that other thing I really want to stress is like I've had, and my fourth book will be out in October. I don't have any books under contract right now, and I think there's a misconception, like you said, you get published and then it's like easy sailing from there. I'm on my fourth rejection this year of like getting another middle grade or young adult out there. And so even when you know, are successful, you win awards, or, you know, it's still, you know, where's the market? What are editors interested in? What is the political landscape like? And so rejection doesn't just happen, you know, at the beginning when you're trying to get in the door, it can happen all along the way. And so staying grounded in why you write and storytelling and you know, is also really important because you don't know what the next thing is going to look like, and how your story is or is not going to get out there.
Yeah, I do think maybe we should start like a retreat in Italy. It costs just an exorbitant sum of money. We only have to do one a year.
Yeah.
And we can all do fun, free stuff for everybody. Yeah, staying grounded and like remembering why you write. I think that's a great segue into, you know, people have sometimes they develop pretty complex rituals around how they write. They need X and Y and Z. And of course, you want like the weather to be perfect and the temperature to be good and you to have your good slippers. But what is the bare minimum you really need to like get the work done for each of you? I mean, it could be as simple as just a laptop or coffee, but I'm just kind of curious, like, KB, I know you're at a residency right now, so you have kind of this wonderful like protection of space, which frankly feels luxurious, and I'm a little jealous. Um,
Yeah. So this is not the regular situation of my writing. Usually I'm actually writing in between Zoom meetings and on planes and all of that kind of stuff, right?
there you go.
However, right, I think that the basis of what I need in order to get writing done is time, you know, and you could get time from anywhere these days. Like as the years go by, like my schedule gets more and more complicated, but if I care, I will make time to do it. And like even if the time is small, just like being focused when that time comes around. So I have ADHD, which means like it's been a lifelong journey of me trying to figure out how something can retain my focus. And what works for me is like I have to be like all of my social media is blocked during my writing time, you know, due to some blocker. All of my like outside things that need to be done just like don't matter for however long it is that I'm writing. So 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 4 hours. I mean, it's very rare that I have 4 hours these days, but like any amount of time that I said, I like try to keep that time prestige. And I treat it as seriously as I would like going to some 9 to 5, right? So like if I have said that I'm gonna write from 2 to 3, then I can't be like, oh, my friend hit me up and like let's go to brunch or whatever. Like I have to kind of be serious. And then also space. I am a person that reads my stuff out loud. That's just a practice that I've had really since I was a teen in spoken word. And like if it doesn't sound right out loud, I need to change it, right? So I need like literally physical space where I can read out loud and it not be a nuisance. So like coffee shops generally is a little too hard for me. Like I'd rather just need like a room of some sort, whether it be my bedroom or you know, office space or whatever, where I can like read my stuff out loud as I'm kind of going and editing. And then my laptop and a little like notebook. I keep kind of both of those on me all the time. And then ideally also a book. So like everywhere I go, I also have like a book in my little monster backpack that I walk around with. Those are the bare minimums though. Anything else is like a cherry on top.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. If you fight to make time for it, it can happen within like 5 minutes. Kristen, Mariama, does location matter? Or do you just get her done, as they say?
I don't know, I don't really feel like I can sometimes be too precious about location. So I feel it's kind of just, I mean, I do need my laptop, but it's like, it's kind of a combination. It's all about time, really, honestly. It's like kind of, once again, yeah, saying no to some of those brunch hangs sometimes. And then also, even though I struggle with this, like the discipline when you have like a day job, that means you're going to have to get up early, especially when I can't stay up as late at night anymore.
Right.
I'm like, I can't write, and I'm not an early get up early girl at all. But I think, yeah, um, I have to have goldfish. I like to eat goldfish. That's my, I need to eat, like have some type of snack sometimes. And time and capacity, right? Like I also have a 9 to 5 in education. It's demanding. I'm not an everyday writer and I'm not going to be an everyday writer. But I also think the work of writing is stuff that you're doing when you're not writing, like thinking, like being in community, going and experience different art installations, art forms. And so I try to remind myself of that when I'm being hard on myself. Like you didn't sit down at your desk today and do the writing. Um, that I think there's this like I used to believe that I could only be a writer if I lived in like on the coast. You know, if I lived like if I was like Carrie Bradshaw in New York, which honestly that is a very unrealistic depiction of a writer. Or if I was like in California, right? And that's just not the case. You write when you can write and you make the time. And so when I'm on deadline, I pick 2 days a week where I commit to a 45-minute session where I block everything, like you said, and I set a timer and you don't stop writing for 45 minutes. And then I do Saturday like retreats with myself. I'm not really going anywhere fancy. I'm like in my home, maybe the library because it's quiet. But like that's what I'm doing for that Saturday. I'm starting at 10, I'm taking breaks, I'm having lunch, and maybe I'm ending at like 3 or 4, right? So I think that's important. And then I'm music, I love music. So I often think about projects with soundtracks. So I do indulge myself a little bit by making a playlist before I start like a book or a project and think about like what would the soundtrack for the story be? And that becomes like a little bit of a ritual, maybe procrastination, but also a little bit of a ritual for like getting into the work. So that's something I also have to have is like music that I think about before, non-verbal music when I'm writing and drafting, and when I'm editing, I can start adding music that's like got words and lyrics, because I want to sing along, obviously, you know. And reading things out loud, I have to do that too. I think that's from poems and spoken word. Like if it sounds funky when I say it out loud, if I trip over it, I need to go back to that sentence or that piece of writing.
Yeah, that's such a valuable tool, the reading aloud over and over and over again. You may have heard rumors that all of us and the vast majority of the audience are adopted. And I think that is true. To me, it feels very special to be in community with adopted people. I only really found the adoptee community a couple years ago, and I still I still have some disbelief when I'm in a room with all adoptees of like, really, all of us, like everybody. Um, and I feel the same way when I find myself in community with queer folks. You know, there's a similar, just like an ease and joy to like be in each other's presence. So, what might your experiences be finding communities that give you that peace, whether they're queer, adoptee, or otherwise? I guess we'll start with Mariama. I feel like we haven't started with you yet.
I mean, just off the bat, like finding communities like this are just really life affirming. And especially right now in our current moment, leaning into those spaces where are people who you can be yourself with, right? Or not feel like you have to pretend or for me do the adoptee perfectionist people pleasing thing. And so yeah, I mean I grew up with a couple friends who were adoptees like me, but didn't fully like come out of the fog, as we say, until college, really, where I actively started seeking out other adoptees, actively started seeking out other queer folk. And so I am always looking for that connection and that community as an adult. Someone in an earlier panel said we never stop being adoptees. And there's a lot of focus on like adoptees when you're younger, but like where do we go and how do we build community outside of, our homes and our upbringings, and come together? And so, yeah, I think I've loved this particular festival. I've loved being a part of the planning committee. I've loved the individual adoptees that I like see at a festival or get to like sit down and have coffee with. Um, and likewise queer folks and queer adoptees. Like it's just a bonus. Anytime I get to be in those spaces or help curate those spaces as well.
Cool. Kristen, do you have any community journey tips, stories?
I don't know about tips, but I just want to echo, it's just awesome to be part of this. Like, yeah, I feel like queer community been part of like since teenage years to now, but like I feel adoptee community, like there was a lot in childhood. Like I grew up in Rochester and there is like a big like Korean adoptee community there. Um and so I knew like a lot of those kids when I was those they were my friends when I was a kid. But then I feel like there's been like sort of a lull. So and then I found more adoptee community by writing community, right? And being part of this. And yeah, I don't know. I love this idea for the panel also because I feel it's such a like being queer, being an adoptee. It is like, as Mariama said, that hybrid thing where it's like you kind of embrace, or at least I personally do, like this sort of there's this sort of like in-betweenness to both of those things. And I think maybe when I was younger, I felt that ambiguity was like I was a little more unsure of it, but now I embrace it. And it's great to be among others too.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're glad we have you. KB, anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely echoing a lot of what has already been said, like being in community with folks within same demographics or similar experiences, views, like is really important and life-giving. Spaces I've personally been a part of are like literary community, right? Queer community, social justice community. I actually have never been in a community of like queer adoptees. I'm like, wow, I'm kind of behind, but grateful to be here today with y'all speaking about these things. I think that being in community with folks that you can find peace with, right? Like it keeps you creative, right? It matters to me that I started in a community of Black queer writers at a high school after school program. That's where I started my literary journey. We weren't even like all out at the time, but like now we're all, queer as fuck, which I love.
It sure happens.
Yeah, it's like clearly we knew before we were like able to tell ourselves or each other that. And yeah, that's really where I've stayed, right? Like I thrive in like community with other writers. Other writers honestly like keep me accountable, keep me wanting to continue to like grow in my writing. Also like been a part of the queer community where I live in Austin, Texas, and a part of different social justice communities over time. And I think especially in times like this, right? Like it's important for you to feel peace somewhere because like the world is so chaotic. So seeking out, like, I guess advice that I would give is like actively seek out community. Because truly you will be a better writer in person when you're like doing the literary thing, doing the living thing with other people. And truly like your community in this literary space, especially like these are gonna be the people giving you blurbs. These are gonna be the people giving you gigs. These are going to be the people listening to you crash out about some, publisher situation that you don't like to keep you away from doing that on the internet. Like these people are going to be your saving grace. To this day, I think like most of the gigs that I get, 70% of them are references, like just people that I've worked with before that I consider friends that have suggested me for something, right? Like a lot of the blurbs that I get, I'm not just like reaching out to Stephen King blindly or whatever. Like I'm asking my friends, like who have been friends with me since like before either of us had books, you know?
Yeah.
So when someone's like, "Oh my God, this award-winning writer gave you this blurb," and I'm like, "Yes, it helps that we're friends," you know.
Yes.
Um,
I
it's
can
like
text them and ask them,
exactly
what
like
is a San Francisco burrito? And they will text me back,
and
you know?
you can come up together. Like it's so beautiful to see that, to see those friendships, like and how they evolve over time and how two people can be made better just by knowing each other. So yeah.
Yeah, do the living thing is what I wrote down from that answer. What a great answer. So we have just a few moments left. And I want to end because one of the things that brings me a lot of joy is amplifying the voices and bringing people up at every turn that you can. So I'm curious, what writers, artists, things are you loving right now that you'd like to give a shout out to? We'll start with Mariama, who has unmuted.
Music wise, I can't stop listening to Doechii. Just want to put that out
Okay.
there. Like, yes, if you've not checked out Doechii, please do that. Storytelling on point for her as a musical artist and a rapper. Stephanie Valentine, who's an adoptee who will be featured later, has a book out called First Love Languages and as an adoptee, and I really love her work. And then Jazz Hammonds, they are YA author, have written a book called Thirsty, We Deserve Monuments. And I really love their work a lot.
Perfect, great. And the closing minute, KB, who would you like to amplify?
Very quickly, I'm reading 2 books right now. Magnolia by A. Van Jordan. It's a oldie but a goodie poetry collection following a Black woman in 1936 who was very close to winning the National Spelling Bee, but then they like pulled out a word that wasn't on the official list. It's a very interesting like narrative poetry collection. And then also Concentrate by Courtney Faye Taylor is a poetry collection that I'm reading right now, which is really amazing. I definitely want to big up Doechii too. I love the Swamp Princess. I also have been watching a lot of Drag Race. It's kind of toxic. So shout
It
out to
does feel a little toxic, but a good toxic almost. We'll talk about that later. Okay, I just want to make sure we have time for Kristen. Kristen, who would you like to lift up?
I'm going to shout out the writer Hurley Winkler because she's a fellow queer adoptee and she has a book that she's like trying to publish called Plant Mom. So if there's anybody, agents or publishers, check it out. And also Kaholi Bailey. She wrote a book of essays called Miseducation of a 90s Baby. Kind of takes place in the same time period as Log Off, but as nonfiction and essays.
That is so cool. Well, thank you all. I believe Alice will be rejoining us with some closing notes. We did not cover half of what I wanted to cover, but we can all just hang out and do it again.
Thank you so much. Yes, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for all of your wisdom and your opening up and giving us all wonderful suggestions, whether we're queer or not. Very nice. I really enjoyed this. Okay, so next up is our sizzle reel, which will be happening at 2:20. Please take the please look at it at the YouTube link that I just put in the channel. Please, if you're going to talk about us on social media, tag us. Also, remember to buy books of all of these wonderful authors and everybody else who is out here because we really need to, publishers say, well, adoptee books don't sell. Well, you got to buy the fucking books if you want them to, you want people to publish you. So please support adoptee authors. Lastly, please, if you feel so moved, you can donate to us through our Venmo. All of the proceeds are going to go to these wonderful moderators who signed on as volunteers, not expecting any money. So we just want to show them thank you for taking the time and the labor for all of us to talk about their writing and their lives and really enriching us all. So thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you again at the roundtable reading and the workshops and the sizzle reel. Okay, thank you. Bye.